Hi. I hope this is going to be really fun. I'm going to go to a lot of wide-ranging perspectives and share a number of different ways of looking at the meta crisis, entrepreneurship, and kind of riding through this massive wave of chaos that we're all feeling at least the beginning impulses of. So I want to offer first just a little bit of context, because as good integralists, we all know that the context shapes the content. So just to give you a little bit of background on me, I'm a bit of an integral outsider. I felt a little bit called out yesterday when Bensei was talking about the integral loners, the type 5s. I was like, oh man, he's got my number. So that's me. I don't tend to come to a lot of these types of events, mostly because I am a bit of a liminalist, I'm a mystic, a little bit of a hermit, and I like sitting at home and working on businesses. That's what makes me happy. But I also recognize, and you'll hear in the course of this conversation today, that gathering in spaces, in human bodies, with human energy fields, and making real connections is so critically important. So we hopped a flight to Hungary, and here we are. I also, as Stefan mentioned, in kind of reinforcing this idea of me as a mystic, wrote a book in 2018 called Awakening the Mystics. And my background, you heard a little bit of, I've got academic background in business and music as undergrad degrees, a master's in acupuncture, a doctorate in chiropractic, and currently doing a PhD in integral noetic sciences. I spent a decade as a chiropractor doing a type of technique specifically working with entrepreneurs to help them operate at their highest level and really work through long-standing patterns of fight and flight and stress in the body that were holding them from being the entrepreneur that they needed to be to have the business that they wanted to have. So my perspective on entrepreneurship is a little bit different because I'm really coming at it from a holistic perspective, not just in the systems and processes and the reports and all of that, but really who's this entrepreneur manifesting as inside their business. And one of the things that I always get interested about when I present is who is this human from a typological perspective, because there's always going to be inherent biases. So this gives a little bit of a frame of who I might be. And the last one, I don't think I have to apologize for, but I am American, and that comes with a certain set of kind of characteristics, perhaps, some perspectives. So I want to talk about what a singularity is, just a first definition so we're all operating on the same page. Excuse me, a singularity is a point at which a feature within a domain reaches a level of exponential growth and takes on an entirely new and sometimes unrecognizable set of characteristics, behaviors, and directions. So this word actually came from physics and mathematics, and there's a lot of speculation that there's a singularity at the center of a black hole. A lot of the physicists like to fight about this because that's supposed to rip apart time and space. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But essentially, this is a point in time, space, some system, some domain where something occurs and everything else changes. So we're most used to talking about this from the upper right, from the tech domain, from the it space, right? So we're looking at things like AI, quantum computing, CRISPR, computer-brain interfaces, gene engineering, all of these kinds of massive technological changes that as they continue to land are going to radically change what it means to be a human being on this planet. However, we as good integralists also know that when we bump into the second tier, that's also a singularity. There's a radical shift inside of us that completely transforms our reality, our experience, ourself, and the way that we relate to the world around us. That's exactly the same type of change that occurs in a very different domain. And then lastly, there's a singularity that we're waiting for signs of in the we space. Now, as you can see, in each of these domains, we have examples of what the singularity looks like, except for this. We have social division, we have a culture war, and we have collapsing empires. So these are evidence of the meta crisis, and you've probably heard about the meta crisis spoken of by a number of different people, and we're going to go into that in just a little bit. But there's a reason why I've specifically shown that we have singularities here and not here yet. So metacrisis, the salient features that I want to speak about for this particular presentation are the meaning crisis. You might have heard John Vervaeke talking about this. Basically, what does it mean to be a human in this time and age where so much is changing and we can't depend on the way our parents grew up and our grandparents grew up? Everything is so radically different. An ecological crisis, that needs no introduction. Everyone is very well familiar with that. Capture and control, which is sometimes called game A dynamics, which essentially means in corporations, in governments, in social structures, they're all looking to gather the resources towards them and control them so they have an ability to steer the discourse and steer the social and cultural memes. Nuclear threats we're familiar with, authoritarianism, centralized opacity, which is basically all the power centralizes at the top and no one really actually knows what's going on in the center of governments, similar to those capture and control dynamics. And my hope is that this meta-crisis is actually the cleansing action of the first tier. It's actually the way that we resolve all the shadow occurring in the first tier. And the reasons for the meta-crisis is kind of my central thrust for this conversation. And then when we get into entrepreneurship, we're going to talk about what to do about it. So we know these three domains I already introduced are the we, the I, and the it. And what we see is happening is that we are feeding all the energy from the we domain and from the I domain into the it domain. So all of our energy as families, as couples, as a society, as a culture is going to serving creating tech, creating stuff, materialism, and abstracted ways that's actually pulling from the energy that is eroding now our social and cultural domains and fed into this externalized and materialized culture. So I want to show a couple different ways in which that's happening. Habermas actually spoke about this. He said that the it domain has colonized the I and the we space. So basically, all of that it energy has come down into these two other spaces and taken all of that energy to build up. And that's the reason that the singularity in the it domain is moving the fastest, because it's got the most amount of energy, and there's no singularity yet. We just have meta-crisis in the we domain. Anthony Giddens is a sociologist, very famous in the UK, and he talks about the juggernaut of modernity. This also ties right into the meta-crisis. Basically, in modernity, because of modernity, we have so many problems that we can see, so many issues that we need to address, and me as an individual human, I don't know what to do. And it's leading to all of these massive stressful situations and trauma within the collective that a couple of the speakers have spoken about. And that's because there's so much that needs to happen, but our social structures are not sufficient enough to actually make those solutions. Yeah, exactly what I've been saying, that the we space is the lagging domain. So we don't know what the singularity is here yet. And one of the speakers this morning was just mentioning this. Is it post-capitalism? Is there something coming after democracy? Are we finally actually going to get democracy instead of a corporatocracy? Is there some other form of social, governmental, cultural kind of structure that's going to arise from this? And I actually, in 2019 and 2020, I was involved in a program called Superhuman OS, which is an online integral training program. And within that, there was a feature of that program called the Philosopher's Circle. And through that, I was actually able to interview Ken Wilber 11 times between 2019 and 2020. And one of the things that was happening in that is the students of the course got to ask questions of Ken. So a really great, amazing opportunity. Every month we would hold this. And sometimes the questions were great. Sometimes the questions needed a little bit of help, and I would ask some questions. So one of the questions that I asked Ken is, we know in the upper left that you can't skip a step. Right? The developmental levels, you have to go through all the steps. But is that true in the lower right? Is it possible that we could go from this really primarily orange-based social structure that we're still in, could we jump to the second tier? And the perhaps unsatisfying answer is, we don't have the research to know yet. So I'd say let's figure it out. So a couple of it domain what ifs that I'm especially keeping my eye on. I wouldn't necessarily say nervous about, but definitely keeping my eye on. Longevity medicine. So imagine quantum computing, where we can model everything that's happening in the body, model disease, and create antidotes and medicines on the spot. Gene modeling, AI, regenerative medicine, and radical life extension. What does that turn into? It turns into a 300-year lifespan. Can the Earth handle everyone living for 300 years? That immediately necessitates what they call a 0 to 1 culture, so we've got to get off planet. We've got to actually colonize other worlds in order to be able to support just that thing. This is a big demand. What I'm calling the meta-bardo. So imagine quantum computing, AI, real-time biometric tracking, on-demand slow drip of hormonal control or peptides or whatever it may be, Neuralink. Put all three of those together and you have a video game that you are walking into that you don't ever have to leave. Bad news bears. We don't want to see that. Really not good. And lastly, bifurcation of the species. So what happens if we have someone a family for 4 generations and every one of them does gene editing? Is that even still a human anymore? Is that same as an organic person moving their genetic structure along each of these generations? It's very possible, because of the technological influences we're seeing, that the species is actually going to do this. No one's ready for that. No one knows what that means. There's been other times in history where Homo sapiens have lived alongside other species, but it's been a long time, and we don't really know how we might navigate that. So I don't present any of these to be, a doomsdayist, but I think as someone who is able to hold massive perspectives like you all are, it's good to just have an eye on the horizon for some of these things that are we might want to watch out for. So another perspective I want to share, one of the things that I see happen in this conversation, especially with those who are really deeply open-hearted and caring, is that there tends to be a lot of shame and guilt as a human. There's a lot of perspective of, look at what we've done to ourselves, look at what we've done to the planet. And I don't want to bypass that, and I don't want to abdicate responsibility. I think we certainly have had a role to play. And if Ken's assertion is right, that these developmental levels are actually grooves in the cosmos themselves, and we're just following these grooves, then perhaps this had to happen. Perhaps we're in a scenario where we're just following the path of the way the cosmos has built itself. And again, I don't offer that in any way to create a bypass, but instead to expand the amount of perspectives we're holding at the same time. And I think if we tune into that from our subtle awareness and we start to track the way that this is moving, it creates a type of maybe peacefulness inside that, regardless of what occurs, the universe has us. My Zen teacher's teacher, Philip Kapleau, started the Rochester Zen Center in the 50s or 60s and famously said, you can't fall out of the universe. So no matter what happens, we as souls endure. There's always going to be karma for us to resolve. There's always going to be work for us to do. If we need to have bodies, the universe is going to put us in a body somewhere. So yes, we have work to do, and yes, there may be a larger cosmic thing happening at the same time. So the gift that we get to gather from this, should we choose to, clarity, evolution, strength, and openness. So why entrepreneurs? The majority of the professional conversation in the integral corpus is really centered around organizations and really large corporations. And Lalou, Keegan, Sisodia are really all looking at larger organizational structures. And because I work with entrepreneurs, usually in small businesses, 7, 8 figures sometimes, but usually not much bigger than that. What I see is that they're really living at their leading edge, and they are really open for this type of conversation and very developmentally driven. So if you look at if you took 100 entrepreneurs versus 100 people in a corporate structure, it's more likely that the entrepreneurs are actually going to be the ones that are open to advanced perspectives. And people who are in the corporate organizations, I don't see as being developmentally oriented. So I think that there's more traction available with the entrepreneurs. They're inherently developmental most of the time, and pardon my French, because they get their ass in a sling and they need to figure out some way to get their minds past what's going on. They get really burned out or shut down, or there's a massive amount of stress that they need, and they need these advanced perspectives. And I really see this entrepreneurial journey as the hero's journey and as the spiritual awakening process. I've just worked with so many entrepreneurs who come to an awakening because they're getting beat down in their business. And eventually they make it through and the business becomes successful. But the amount of transformation that has to occur because they're in that process is huge. So this is one of the main reasons I focus on entrepreneurs rather than going and doing talks in corporate environments. Did my clicker stop? I think my clicker stopped. Oh, we'll do it that way. So I see integral organizations as decentralized and arboreal, meaning they're like big canopies of a tree, versus integral entrepreneurs are mycelial. They're from the ground up. They're solving problems and working on the forest floor, but very interconnected and very comprehensive. So if we have a whole stack of entrepreneurs operating from second-tier perspectives and rebuilding the we space, I see their organizations as benevolence-generating engines, what I call BGEs. And I think it's really a beautiful frame that we get to see entrepreneurship as. It's like you build this business and it's designed to create ripples of the good, the true, and the beautiful. These are the philosophical first principles that I want to help entrepreneurs build into their business. We can actually start to ask questions like, what does post-growth goodness look like in your business? Interesting question. How truthful and transparent are you in your business? Not just are you doing proper reporting, but are you actually open with your processes for the stakeholders? Do they see what they need to see? How much beauty, beyond just your branding, are you actually creating in the world? This is a question that would freak out people in the corporate environment a lot of the time. Beauty? What does it need to be? Oh, what's that mean? It's too scary, it's too emotional. But entrepreneurs are like, yeah, let's do this. This is really exciting. Let's make something big and artistic and beautiful. They're creators. Are we on time? I'm gonna skip past this. I'm doing a longer version of this talk, and I'll include some of the slides I wasn't able to do and add that in. So 3 very simple examples of ways that we can start to include the GTB W3, so goodness, truth, beauty, win, win, win. So do a GTB W3 quarterly assessment. Every time when you do your quarterly planning, are you creating goodness? Are you creating more goodness than you did last quarter? More truth and honesty, more beauty. Everything that your business touches, are they winning because your business exists? That's the ripple of the win-win-win. That's absolutely possible. And are you winning? And of course, are your customers winning as well? This is something that I learned from Sean Esbjorn Hargens, who's one of my advisors in the school program, who I know all you know and love as well. He's a beautiful, warm heart, as well as a brilliant mind. The capacity for perspective taking, seeking, and coordinating. Integralists usually do well with perspective taking. We don't always do great with perspective seeking. Going out into the others, into the people who are not so integral, and asking and really learning and starting where they are. All of you know, as we're looking at these developmental levels, you can't pull someone into their next level. You have to go to where they are, be with them at their level, take and seek their perspective, and work with them from that spot until they become energized enough that they can move to their next level. And then once you have these perspectives, How do you actually coordinate them to make meaningful decisions from where they are operating? Okay, I'm running low on time, so we're going to move forward, and we're going to move to solutions. I have 9 solutions we're going to move through fairly quickly. The first is be neurologically nimble. So that has died. Wilbur says, the taller the ladder, the more that it sways. There is massive change coming. How much of that change can you handle in your nervous system? Your nervous system is literally the backbone of you and the backbone of your business. We need to be able to hold the amount of complexity that is coming down the line. So expand your capacity for novelty. Second, post-growth, unhooking materialism, both scientific. We don't need to have all randomized, double-blinded controlled trials. We can think outside the box of that a little bit. We know that the subtle realms don't really work in a test tube, and it's okay not to live in that box. And simultaneously, materialism as well. You know, all of our inborn kind of natural modernity's mind virus is still usually implicit somewhere in our cellular makeup. We've got to find better and better ways to get that out of our system. Be evolutionarily evocative. One of my recognitions in integral groups is that we're so kind and so humble, but we don't often stand in front and lead with power and radiate and actually drive our care and our love and our heart into the space around us. I would love to feel that driving energy inside the integral community again. Number 4, GT3WB, GTBW3 businesses. Ground up assessments and quarterly reviews, transparency, we talked about this. Flip the triple. It, I, and we. Let's turn it on its head. The we space has to become the most important thing again. We have to relate human to human. We have to seek perspectives. We have to actually be bodies energetically and neurologically in space together. And that's going to set the foundation for reformatting society and culture. Integralists are naturally very good at being comprehensive generalists. How many perspectives in how many domains can you hold and integrate into what you're doing as a business? And then lastly, devotion to the real over the true. This is a very similar idea. The true is the gift of the it domain. The real is the gift of the we domain. It's us relating like this, right? It's us feeling each other. It's us being in contact with nature and the environment. And yes, beware the metabardo, we talked about that. Be a business bodhisattva. Be the calm, still center in the middle of the chaos. Your customers, your team, everyone around you is going to start freaking out as this gets wilder and wilder. Hold the center and be that still point for them. And then lastly, have harrowing hope. So I'll leave you with this last quote. Our timing is perfect. This last quote, I looked for the attribution for endlessly, but couldn't find. And this quote is, when the flood came, I did not run. The flood of novelty, wildness, breakdown of culture is coming. And it's our job as integralists to stand and be the calm, peaceful, certain, powerful center so that we can start to build this better world we all know and feel is coming. Thank you.